be seated. Well, good morning. Lovely to see all of you. Many familiar faces, some new. I'm delighted to see you and to be here this morning. I want to start my sermon by talking about one of my heroes, Paul Farmer. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. His name has become more common in recent years. And several years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, we did a book study on him, on his book, or it wasn't his book, but it was a book about him called Mountains Beyond Mountains, that talked about his work first in Haiti, but then around the world. But this one focused on his work in Haiti as an anthropologist and then as a doctor. And so all of this was prelude, this work that he did in Haiti, to his founding Partners in Health, which you might have heard of, which St. Matthew supports financially. And Partners in Health is a nonprofit that advocates for healthcare access and for healthcare justice for the poorest of the poor all around the world. Farmer died almost 2 years ago this February, but his work, and as importantly, his belief that healthcare is a basic human right, continues. So I remember 10 or 15 years ago when I read Mountains Beyond Mountains, something that he said in that book that stayed with me all these years. It was right after college. He went to Duke, and he had traveled to Haiti, and he had witnessed poverty there like he'd never seen before. And it was in that formative time, as he, as a young, early 20s person, was trying to figure out just what he wanted to do with his life, that he said he realized most clearly of all that I didn't want to live conflicted. Meaning, he wanted what he believed about people, about the world, about dignity, about human rights. He wanted these core beliefs to match up with his actions, with what he did. That became clear for him. So he became a doctor, and he devoted the rest of his life to living and working with the poor. He founded clinics and hospitals in Haiti, Rwanda, Peru, Russia that have been life-changing. Well, in a way, that's what our gospel parable is about today, this idea of not being conflicted, matching up our actions with what we're shaped by and what we believe. So in the parable, a man sends his 2 sons, to go and work in the vineyard. And the first says, "I will not go," but then later changes his mind and he goes. And the second one says, "I go, sir." And notice there how he says, "sir," so polite, so convincing, so courteous, and yet he doesn't go. Both sons presumably were shaped by their father and their family, presumably in about the same way. And neither first does what their dad asks them, but one comes around, that first son. Now, I imagine all of us can relate to these sons' responses, especially if we've had children or if we were a child, which we all were. That reflexive no that our kids might give us that sometimes gets changed to a yes, or that yes, even that polite yes, that assuring yes, that doesn't turn into anything at all. How many times growing up, I was one of 4 kids, did my parents ask us to do something, and one of us, usually 1 out of the 4, just flat out said no, or else slunk away so they wouldn't have to. But then later maybe came back and did what was asked because we trusted them. Or can you think of times when you've asked someone to do something, whether as a child or even now as an adult, and they said, yes, of course, but then they don't do it? Either they forgot, or maybe they really never even wanted to subliminally, and so it just didn't happen. I was trying to think of personal examples, and I was looking around my house and I spotted a clear one. Multiple water glasses and teacups just sitting there on tables that I'd asked at some point to be taken up and put in the sink. So when I see these, I always get a willing yes from whoever I ask. Makes me feel better. And then 10 months later, they're still in the same spot. Sometimes with a tea bag dried up that's been sitting there for 10 months. I'm exaggerating, but this is how it feels sometimes. And my kids would laugh about this. It's now almost become a thing. I get distressed if there isn't a water glass or a teacup sitting somewhere random in our house. What Jesus is tapping into here in this parable is our inclination, our human proclivity to do what we want or to do it on our own terms. How focused we can all really be on ourselves. And he's challenging his followers to go beyond that limited vision, to do what he teaches, to embody what they believe. To liken this to faith, it's about aligning our lives and our desires with the desires of God, going beyond our own short-sightedness and doing sometimes the things that we don't at first off want to do, because it'll take some sacrifice from us. It might even take letting go of the things that we want. But Jesus challenges this. He challenges his followers to expand their horizons beyond themselves, because Jesus knows the vineyard holds promise and a sweetness that we're not going to otherwise taste. Don't be conflicted. Have what you believe match what you do. That's the first thing. But there's a second important thing going on in this parable, and it's this issue of blindness, of being blind. And I think to get this in the parable, you have to kind of have the context into which it's falling in the story. So Jesus has just come into the temple for his last time. And in this gospel, he's ridden into Jerusalem and entered the temple, and he's on a donkey. And the common people welcome him with Hosanna, as you recognize the story from Palm Sunday. They acclaim him as the Messiah. They give him power and authority. Now, this is all very threatening to the religious authorities, and so you can hear that in what was prelude to the parable today. They confront Jesus. It's like a showdown, and Jesus doesn't hold back. They try to catch him in their tricky words, and he catches them right back, pointing out their own glaring hypocrisy. They're filling their coffers at the expense of the poor. He's turned over the tables of the money changers. They're teaching and admonishing one thing from all the people, and then doing with their lives another. It's into this context that Jesus is actually sharing this parable. And through this parable, while it might not be immediately obvious, he's really pointing to their blindness and to the way they can use smooth words but not actually do what they're saying. Blindness like that second son who never gets beyond his world, who can't get beyond it, who will say anything to anyone, even to himself, to make sure that his world stays intact. Blinders, Jesus says, that we're all capable of putting on, not just the religious authorities, but any human being. A few weeks ago, I know many of you know this, there was a group of us here from St. Matthew's, a sizable group, that went on a pilgrimage to Edenton for the unveiling of this historical marker, State v. Man. And one of the things that we did along the way on this trip, and not far from Edenton, was visit Somerset Place, the plantation home of the Collins family, a family that also has deep ties here to St. Matthew's. So there was a lot that struck me as we toured those grounds of Somerset Place that were literally cut out of the marshland, the wet marshland of North Carolina. And the first thing that struck me was how brutal it must have been to have cleared that land to have dug those 6-foot wide canals to drain the land, all done by enslaved workers. Somerset has one of the most extensive archival documentations of the people enslaved there, records that were meticulously kept by Josiah Collins III as a business ledger, and we still have them. And so from those, they've been able to recreate the actual slave quarters where people lived, and even names of some of the people that lived in those slave quarters. Quarters that would hold 8 to 10 people, sometimes if you were fortunate of your family, in a single room, a stone's throw away from the beautifully appointed plantation home, complete with the manicured English garden. Collins trying to sort of model Somerset in England, his ancestral home. So one of the images from the house there, the plantation house, that's really stayed with me and stayed in my mind is in one of the bedrooms. I can't remember if it's the master bedroom or another, but it's a gold-framed painting there on the wall, and it's of Moses crossing the Red Sea, God parting the waters so Moses can lead the enslaved Israelites to freedom. In the bedroom, on the wall of the plantation home. While outside, a small white fence separated off this house and the people that lived there from the misery and the suffering of the enslaved people who worked to make it all possible. Was the painting purely decorative? Maybe. Was it curated there purposefully by a curator in the house and on the wall to sort of make a point? Perhaps. The point is, whatever it was, it really wasn't that hard to imagine such a painting hanging on the wall in that house, where there was such a complete and total disjunct between what the people who lived in that house believed about themselves and about their Christian faith and how they lived. There was a chasm, Jesus might say, a willful blindness. We also learned that our church, the Episcopal Church, developed catechisms for the enslaved that were all about teaching obedience to the master, that taught about the structure of the universe that was created by God and designed to keep everybody in their place, by the church. Another chasm, a willful blindness. The church, a blindness that denied the dignity and the humanity of children of God. Now, it would be easy enough to condemn all of this, to be shocked, to wonder how it ever could be possible. And of course, we do all those things in hindsight. We look back and we're sort of horrified. But what's really harder to take in and to wrap our minds around, what's more sobering, is to realize how vast swaths of people, most of whom considered themselves Christian, lived with these willful blinders to the cruelty and suffering that was around them, that was right there. And the parable is a warning to all of us about how easy it really is to put on blinders to suffering or to anything that we don't want to see. About the inclination that human beings have to do what we want at whatever cost, to even convince ourselves, others but ourselves too, of its righteousness, of it being okay. And Jesus, in this parable, he's calling the disciples to be aware of this, to be mindful, and to stay moored to a greater authority that gets you outside of this way of thinking, to the life and to the kingdom that he's embodying of sacrificial love that was talked about so beautifully in that letter from Paul in Philippians. And Jesus, he's calling them out of that, and he's calling them back into God's kingdom always, back into that good vineyard, beyond their small and self-oriented worlds. There's a word that's used in the parable, metamelomai, and it means a changing of mind, a changing of one's cares and priorities, but with an accent on sorrow or of regret. It's kind of like the word that we know of as repentance, which at its heart means to go beyond the mind that we have, but with this same accent on sorrow or regret for something that's been done. A mindfulness of things that have been done and left undone, either by ourselves or by our church or by our communities. And not so much in a guilt-stricken kind of way, but in a way that acknowledges this tension between our needs, our own blindnesses, and the kingdom of God. And this metamelomai, it's a turning towards a kingdom that moves us deeper and deeper into God's world and away from ourselves. And the beauty and the sorrow of this world, a turning and moving into that. In a way, that pilgrimage we took was all about metamelomai. Because we, from St. Matthew's, we went as bearers of our history, connected to enslaving families like Ruffin and Collins. But we also went this time around as witnesses to the lives of the ones who had been enslaved. We studied and prayed about these people before we went. We prayed about them, we learned about them, we knew their stories. Lydia, Harriet Jacobs. We even read and learned the 16 names of the people that they know at Somerset Place, Duco and others who were enslaved there. So we went, and this time we had a difference in emphasis, a wholer picture. And we showed up and we focused particularly on the enslaved people. At the marker ceremony, at Somerset and Edenton, a difference in emphasis. We wore buttons that Jeff Thompson made here. We wore buttons that said, "We remember Lydia," and we shared those with other people. And on our buttons, it had the Episcopal insignia on it. A mark in its own way of this word, metalomai, of not being blind anymore, of having a new heart, a new spirit from us, from our church. And it became so clear to me that this was vineyard work. This was laboring in the vineyard, enjoying being there and tasting a new sweetness that could be possible in this life, despite things done and left undone. Turning in a new way, focusing our priorities in a new way. There are so many little and big ways that this invitation is offered for us every day to move into the vineyard that's beyond our own small plot of land. Jesus calls us into that. We just have to be willing to lean into them, to be mindful of our blinders that don't want to see things, and let them call us actually into a bigger world. Note them and then move into them. Almost see them as an invitation. Because if we can see the places where we're blind, we might get invited to see how beautiful the vineyard really is if we're willing to enter into it. And we'll go there and we'll actually want to till the soil. The people who go on these pilgrimages, they want to go and they want to be in that soil, and they begin to see how they get fed by its riches. So my prayer is that we all might have the courage individually, but as an entire community of faith, that we might have the courage, the humility, our self-awareness to travel there, to be in those vineyards right here in Orange County, to not be conflicted, to follow Jesus. Amen.
Amen.